Da, 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 da. What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes. Get those notifications out. Let people know I've gone live. In the meantime, if you've never met me before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. And to be honest, today I was all about the inside. I did not even step foot out of my apartment except to go to the garbage chute to throw some garbage down it. It has been a very interesting day, but very contemplative and full of understandings that I have never come across in my entire life. I really feel so much different than I did this morning. And because it only happened or it only started happening in the past couple of hours, like I have been in contemplation all day today, but that little bit of movement that, I always hope to come across, in my day to day, but it's not an everyday, day to day thing. So when I do make some significant movement in my life, it really does sometimes throw me for a loop, and I feel like I've just been thrown into the loop. But right, it is what it is. I've always been that person to ride the waves in my understandings, trusting that there is something bigger out there, right? That's taking care of things in those understandings that I don't understand, right? So, how can I be expected to take hold of that steering wheel and head in a direction that mm, seems unpassable, right? Seems a little bit unbelievable sometimes, but again, in my choices, and specifically that choice to ride the waves, I have to be willing to at least contemplate and reflect on the happenings in my life and the happenings in the lives that, touch my life. And that's the truth. But it has been a heavy day. It has been a day that I stayed in. I'm grateful. We had some really heavy rain for a couple hours. It was really enjoyable to watch, not only to watch, but I actually, even though it was still hot, I put the window open just to bring in that fresh, clean air. We're still dealing with wildfires, but I'm really optimistic that that rain today helped out a lot. It's gonna kick up the smoke for sure, but I think in the end, maybe, right, that it'll help to dissipate, if not totally eliminate some of that summer issues that we have had with the wildfires. They say it is global warming, that we should expect that, over the course of the years, that it might get a little bit worse. But this day of innovation, too, right? I'm optimistic we are going to find ways to maybe not combat it, but to maybe work with it in a way, maybe even possibly make it work to our benefit. It's always a possibility. Everything is a possibility if we're willing to put the work into it, if we're willing to put our heart into it, and if we truly believe, if right. And believe was a lesson. It was a hard lesson for me to learn. It took years because, you know, sometimes when you're beaten down a little bit, sometimes when you become disillusioned, sometimes when you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, that 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 idea that things can get better, that sometimes we do lose, oh, here's a word for you guys, hope, right? We do lose hope. And sometimes when we lose hope, right, that also means losing the optimism, losing the faith, losing the belief. And I'm not sure if I ever truly lost it, or I just didn't recognize it when it was coming across my path, because again, sometimes we get so disillusioned by our life experiences. Tonight we're going to keep it light. We're going to keep it light. Hello, Eugene. Thank you so much for popping into my live tonight. What we're going to do is something a little bit different. I have this little book. I took it with me on my walk to the forks yesterday. It's a book, a little book, and it's just full of quotes. When I was a little kid, go back to that disillusionment, sometimes I would open up the Bible and I would just open it up in random pages and I would pray to God, right? Send me a message, and I would stick my hand in the book and I would hit a verse, and you know, more often than not, it would kind of work its way into whatever issue that I had. I've carried that on in my life. I can do it with any kind of book. I have a selections of books behind me. The content is usually, you know, emotions, working in emotions, anthropology, history, and right, religion and spirituality and healing, and some novels of philosophers. It's hard to digest still for me, but as I slowly dip my toes into it, I find that it's very fascinating and relevant today, even though a lot of that philosophy goes back thousands of years, and that's a truth. And to find that, if I just put my foot into it, if I just put that effort and that attention into it, that I can find a little bit of understanding, a little bit of enjoyment in what I'm learning. I usually enjoy learning, right? I didn't always enjoy learning. It's something that, slowly grew on me. Maybe it was spending so much time on my own. It was something that kept me busy, you know, and in keeping myself busy, I became curious in my busyness. And then I became very enthralled and I enjoyed learning. I'm right, a big fan of this digital age, of this age of AI learning. I am so grateful I got pulled into it, but I also understand that it was by my own choices and I could have made a different choice. I could have been that noisy me kind of person and just entertain myself with reality TV and right, my small group of acquaintances and family, right? And, to be able to make a little bit of movement for myself, it has led me into making a lot of movement for myself. And it's going to lead me into even making more movement for myself. And I'm optimistic and I'm hopeful that in doing that for myself, that because I have this brand, that I can come in here and share those experiences, share those learnings, share that little bit of movement in again the hopes and the optimistic idea that somebody might look upon it or sit in on it and realize it as the evidence that I feel that it is. At the very least, it's evidence for myself because I can recognize in my own life the workings of it, the benefits of it, right? And that's my wish for everybody. Every time I show up here, I show up here with the idea that I'm going to share something magnificent that's going to help all of us make a little bit of movement. But like I said, sometimes it doesn't happen every single day, and I'm not disappointed in it, right? Because movement is not comfortable. I was actually talking to my sister today. They canceled her operation again. She got bumped from her operation date again. She was supposed to go in again this Friday. My sister can't deal with this roller coaster of emotions. It's really, really hard for her. And sometimes we really don't have a choice in that, right? And it is in riding the waves and taking hold of some of those lessons that they learn. Like for myself, I would be oming, and I would be doing a little bit of tree hugging. I would be relaxing and not stressing, right? I picked up some tools along the way. My sister deals with stress a little bit different than I do. And who am I to push my ideas on her? She knows I'm here, right? If she wants to have a conversation, and it might be helpful, but then again, it's all in our own choices, and we can only be responsible for our own choices. We can't be responsible, right, for anybody else's choices in life. But what I was going to say, tonight we're going to do something a little bit different because I'm going to make it short tonight. I said that yesterday and it turned out to be over an hour. But tonight, let's just keep it light. Let's pick a quote. We're going to go into this book just like I did when I was a little kid with the Bible and see what the universe, what God, right? Whoever or whatever is in charge has to say, has to offer in the conversation. And hopefully, stop right here. And we're going to send some good cheer to the fire truck. And it's a long one. Oh, it's on their way to a false alarm. I am optimistic in that. Oh my goodness, paramedics and the fire truck, it's serious when you get two run one after another. So hopefully they knock on that door and right, everything is okay and they can turn around and go right back to the station. Okay, you guys, let's go in here. We're just gonna, right? And we're gonna take it from the right hand side of the opening of where I pull the book out. Okay, you guys, here we go. Right hand page. Paralyze resistance with persistence. Wendy Hayes, college football coach. Paralyze resistance with persistence. You know what that says to me is that, it's that scaredy cat in us, right? That anxiety sometimes, when I was a little kid, I was afraid to knock on doors at Halloween to trick or treat, or at Christmas time, knock on the doors and ask somebody if they want to hear a Christmas carol because we were raising money to buy presents for our parents, right? That sometimes We can work ourselves up, and I did that consistently. It was uh, paralyzed me, like this word here. It paralyzed me. It was impossible for me to interact with strangers and authority figures because, of my own experiences. I was very fearful of that. Now, in telling that story, I have to say, I never overcame that fear. Sometimes I would break through. And in the example I'm going to give in that is in my job interviews. Oh my goodness. Job interviews are like the scariest thing in the whole world to me because when you go to meet somebody for that interview, they've already made their decision, right? By the time you sit in your seat, they say it only takes 90 seconds before they, right, recognize if it's a yay or a nay in you being hired into the position, right? But when you need a job, you have to go for the interview. So paralyzed resistance with persistence, right? I got no choice. I have to go in for that interview. And the funny thing is, if I could manage to talk myself into the getting the interview. Once they called me and said, "Can you come in at 3 o'clock?" I was committed. I was in it. I was terrified. I would hope that interview was as soon as possible, not like my sister having her operation being put off. I just wanna choke that right away and get that over and done with because otherwise I would just put myself into a frenzy because of my paralyzed fear, right? That resistance of right. I would never talk myself out of a job interview if I needed that job interview, but I would definitely talk myself out of applying for work because I would know that it in the end it would require an interview. So I would only apply for jobs that, right, I thought I would have a chance at or that would be fun. So I thought maybe the person interviewing me might be a nice person, but I would never know. And I would be so scared. But in my persistence, right, and saying, I just got to do this, I don't have a choice, or I'm not going to be able to put a roof over my head. I'm not going to be able to pay my bills. That I would, right, overcome that fear and right, I would go through it, knock on that door, knowing that within 90 seconds that person had that decision already made, but go in there anyway with the absolute best attitude, with all my life experiences and job experiences back up. And I would pull myself into that character and I wouldn't come out until that interview was over. I would be in that character. And I always nailed it. Always. I think in my whole life of going for a job interview, there was only one job that I didn't get. And that one was pretty recent. That was probably maybe 6 or 7 years ago. And it was for selling cars. Oh my goodness. I said, I'm not a used car salesman. I don't want this job, but I needed a job. And when I got that call for the interview, I didn't have any choice. I had to go in there, right? And the first thing this guy did was freak on me because I came in the wrong door, right? And that just compounded this idea of I do not want to be a car salesman. I do not want to work for this man. I do not want to be here. And it's the first time that I didn't shine. I showed my stuff. I showed my stuff, but I didn't shine like I usually did. And about a week later, I got a letter in the mail, right? And it said, I know you're so disappointed, but we decided to go with somebody else. I was so happy. I did not want to be a used car salesman. And it's the only time I did not get the job that I applied for, right? And, um, and that was because I didn't shine in the interview like I usually did out of desperation, because it didn't matter how desperate I was. I didn't want that position, right? But I would have been persistent. I would have shined in that interview, and I would have, right, gotten that job if I really wanted it, right? Sometimes we over have to overcome our fears, right? Sometimes we have to uh, find ways to trick ourselves into doing things, right? Sometimes, right? Like two things that came into mind were the pink ice donut. Oh, Cindy, you do this and you can have this treat. Or Cindy, you apply yourself all year long. Right? You get the job done, work hard, do your very best, and we're going to reward you with this holiday that I take every September. And that was my stick with the bag on the end, right? I believe in rewards. Sometimes we don't pick the best rewards. We pick those rewards that totally calm our systems, but don't necessarily serve us very well. I'm so grateful that I actually, right, love and thrive on these holidays that I take every September, right? I'm working on it. I'm working on it. And I'm not saying I'm failing in it until, right, I have uh sourced out every possibility to make it happen. At that point, if it doesn't work out for me, then, right, I resort to acceptance, right? Accepting that it wasn't meant to be, and that something maybe bigger and better might come across my path instead. I recognize when I'm not compulsed about something that sometimes these things are not realized, right? So, what we're going to do now, right? Paralyzed resistance. That's overcoming our fear. And you overcome your fear by doing it, right? And then doing it again, and then doing it again until it's no longer a fear, right? That it's just another experience that you've got as a tool along your belt, that, right, it's no longer an issue for you. But I understand that lots of people struggle with this. Paralyze resistance with persistence, right? That's just like, you have to do it. You have to do it. You don't have a choice if you want to get good at something. And this lady was a football coach, right? Oh no, sorry, it's a man. Woody, not Wendy. Woody. Woody Hayes, college football coach. Paralyzed resistance with persistence, right? Just keep going. Don't stop. Find a way. Ride the waves. Adapt and conquer. Have faith in yourself. Believe that, if you make that movement, something will come up behind you and help you out in that process. And what that is in the practice, right? It's in the practice that we get better. So, like I said, we're going to now pick a card, and let's see if this card can be relatable in any way to this quote. It stumped me there for a second. I had to read it a couple of times. Maybe I've got it wrong, but in my own understanding, this is what it's saying to me is, when we have difficulties, we have to work with them. Otherwise, we'll never overcome them. Whatever is pushing up against us, we have to push back on that, right? That's the resistance. And in the practice, it doesn't become a resistance anymore because once we know it, and right, we can do it in our sleep, and there won't be any resistance to that at all anymore. Okay, let's see what my cards say. These are 54 powerful words. They're actually 56 cards, but 54 powerful words. And we'll see. Maybe it will relate to something else, right? Maybe we can, I'm asking it to just have a maybe a little bit better insight than what I brought to the table on that because I'm somebody who resists. I definitely am. But I also know in the lessons that, if I do persist, right? If I never give up, if I adapt and conquer, I can make things happen. And that's the truth. And anybody can do that. Okay, you guys, let's pick a card here. And see what it says. Community. Community offers up a sense of belonging. Well, the first thing that came into my mind was telling that story about that used cars salesman, right? Job. And how I didn't want it and how I didn't get that job. And it was the only job I ever applied for that I never got, right? If I got in, I would apply for jobs and sometimes not get called in for an interview. But if I got the interview, I always aced that interview and I always got the job. But because this word is community and it says here, community offers up a sense of belonging, I knew right away when that owner operator of that dealership, right, cranked at me because I came in the wrong door. Like he seriously, just like he looked like he wanted to take a piece out of me, and just the tone of his voice, like I was that brown stuff in the bottom of somebody's shoes. It just the way it made me feel. I had no wish to be a part of that community. And then probably I have to say, right, that in applying for jobs, which I was very afraid of, I would just, if anything was going to give me anxiety, it would be a job interview for sure, right? But I think for that is, my worry that I would not be acceptable, right? Acceptable as a human being, not as a good employee, because I had a lot of faith in myself. I believed in my experiences and my capabilities. But nobody else out there ever seemed to be, you know, that enthusiastic that I knew what I was talking about or had that experience that I could bring something to the table. Right. And sometimes in that lack of feeling that connection with whoever was doing the interview, I knew I was going into a job, right? I was going into a job and I wasn't going into a community, right? I was maybe going to get the job, but I wasn't going to be happy in the job. I wasn't going to be working for people that I enjoyed working for. And I wasn't going to feel comfortable because I didn't feel like I belonged, right? I was only there for the paycheck and they only had me there for what I could bring to the table, right? This last job, it kind of broke my heart a little bit, right? Because it was such a community and it was a community that I built, right? It took me a few years and and it wasn't a community of the people I worked with, and that's the truth. There were a couple of people that I worked with that I loved, but they didn't stay around for too long. I had a manager I absolutely loved, right? She was a narcissist from hell, but you know what? She kept to her word. She never asked anybody to do anything that she wasn't willing to do herself. Oh, she did lots of yelling and complaining and right, but she was a team player and she was a leader, and yeah, I would have followed suit after her at any time, right? She's got a great job, and if she ever said, "Cindy, I need you," I would be there in 2 minutes, because I know that as much as I would support her, she would support me in that, because that was the relationship that we had, and those relationships didn't come along very often in my life, and I so appreciated that. But she left, right? Like she moved on to something that she thought was better, right? But again, life sometimes throws those wrenches into our lives, and then we find that we're sometimes again floundering, right? But paralyze resistance with persistence, right? Just keep practicing. I guess that's what Woody Hayes was saying, because he was a college football coach, because he's talking about the football players, right? They come into the game and they're just big guys, and they're brought onto the teams because they're big guys, but they don't really know anything, right? Maybe they're so big that they're afraid that when they're going to go tackle somebody, they're going to break every bone in their body, which is what you're supposed to do when you're a football player. Not really break their bones and stuff, but you have to have that mentality that you're just taking out these people, right? That they have to learn the job. They have to learn to be a player on that team. They have to learn to do what they're not comfortable with doing, and sometimes what they don't want to do. And in that persistence of just keep doing it, sometimes they get to realize, well, most of the time, if they want to be an NFL football player, they realize, okay, that wasn't so hard, right? I'm not really going to hurt anybody. They're wearing a helmet and lots of padding, right? This is actually fun. Or I was built for this. When they first started and was brought onto the team, they would never have thought that. But then after maybe a few seasons of playing football and some good mentorship and good coaching and some good quotes like this, paralyze resistance with persistence, right? That they got to love what they're doing. That possibly that it was what they were meant to be doing with their lives, right? And unless they made that choice to at least try, and when they failed, to try again and fail again and then try again, that eventually, right, they got to achieve their dream. And maybe that dream was only meant to belong to a community, and that team, right? That he wasn't too sure that he was going to be able to do the job right, that he was going to be able to learn the job right, that it offered up a sense of belonging when possibly he might not have ever belonged to anything in his entire life. That's all I've got for you, you guys, tonight. We're calling it a night, calling it a very, I don't know, a day full of revelations today, a day of relaxation and just chewing and munching on a little bit of understanding that came across my path and spending a little bit of time with my cat. You guys have a great night, and we'll see you.